Look at this man. Observe him, laughing, jesting, and serenading journalists with his accordion. In the 1970s, if you were to leaf through Western newspapers, you would have known him as a harmless and entertaining African clown. A man who wrote letters to Queen Elizabeth, boldly claiming, "I am the King of Scotland. If you wish to see a real man, come to Uganda, and I shall teach you how to govern your kingdom." But do not be deceived by that expansive, jovial grin. Behind this mask of comedy lay the darkest and most grotesque predator of the 20th century. A man who, in the shadows, forced his cabinet ministers to crawl on their knees. A man who fed his political rivals alive to crocodiles. And, according to the chilling testimony of his personal bodyguards, kept the severed heads of his enemies in his refrigerator, just so he could converse with them. How did a simple army cook transform into a dictator who orchestrated the massacre of 500,000 innocent souls? This is the story of the ascent and eventual collapse of Idi Amin, the cannibal king of Uganda. It stands as a harrowing warning to history that sometimes the clowns are the world's most dangerous killers. History is in the headlines, but the truth? That's hidden in the profiles. Welcome to Profile. Subscribe to join our community of curious minds. To comprehend how this monster was forged, we must return to the era of British colonial rule in East Africa. Idi Amin was a young man of towering stature, standing 193 centimeters tall with a massive, hulking physique, yet possessing no formal education. In 1946, he joined the British colonial army, the King's African Rifles, as an assistant cook. However, his sheer physical dominance and raw strength soon earned him a reputation as a lethal combat soldier and a professional heavyweight boxer. British officers adored him. To them, Idi Amin was the ideal soldier, obedient, brutally violent, and devoid of any political intellect that might pose a challenge to their authority. The British utilized him as a blunt instrument to ruthlessly suppress independence uprisings across Africa. In truth, it was British colonialism that provided the military training for this killing machine, elevating him rank by rank. By the time of Uganda's independence in October 1962, Amin was one of only 2 non-British commissioned officers in the entire military. Driven by blind loyalty, he ascended to the rank of general and became the right hand of then-President Milton Obote. But the president failed to perceive the danger. He had nurtured a rabid dog within his own house. In the late 1960s, Obote began implementing leftist policies, a move that deeply unsettled Western powers and Israel. In January 1971, while the president was abroad for a summit, Idi Amin seized the capital with his tanks and loyalist troops. Historical documents and intelligence speculations suggest that Western agencies, particularly those of Britain and Israel, disillusioned with the previous administration, had given Amin the green light for this coup. The people of Uganda took to the streets, dancing for Idi Amin. They believed this smiling, man-of-the-people general would be the savior of the nation. Britain and the West followed suit, immediately recognizing his regime under the fatal assumption that he is a simple soldier, we can easily control him. They had made a terminal mistake. As soon as he tasted absolute power, the embers of megalomania ignited within Idi Amin's psyche. He was no longer a mere general. He began to perceive himself as an equal to the gods. The first symptom of this descent into madness was manifested in the absurd titles he invented for himself. He issued a formal decree that in all news broadcasts and official state correspondence, he must be addressed by his full, exhaustive title, His Excellency, President for Life, Field Marshal Al-Haji Dr. Idi Amin Dada, conqueror of the British Empire in Africa in general, and Uganda in particular. To further humiliate the former colonial masters, he forced British businessmen residing in Uganda to carry him on their shoulders in a palanquin through the streets, a calculated display of subjugation.
In order to make it absolutely clear to you, I have been honored by the highest order of the conqueror of the British imperialism in Uganda.
To the Western media, these acts were dismissed as the antics of a mad clown. But behind these grotesque spectacles, a genuine catastrophe was metastasizing. Since the British colonial era, Uganda had been home to tens of thousands of people of Asian descent, primarily Indians and Pakistanis. This minority, despite their small numbers, held the keys to more than 90% of Uganda's economy, commerce, banks, and factories.
Would you like to get all Asians out, really, sir?
Yes, they must go to their country.
In August 1972, Idi Amin appeared on national television and made a declaration that would seal the nation's doom. He claimed, "God appeared to me in a dream and commanded me to expel all Asians from Uganda, for they are sucking the lifeblood of our economy." He granted over 50,000 Asians a mere 90 days to flee the country. They were permitted to take only $50 and 2 suitcases of clothing. All their homes, factories, shops, and accumulated wealth were confiscated by the state. The Asian community departed in a state of terror and grief. In a move of staggering incompetence, Amin gifted the seized businesses and factories to his illiterate army generals and personal cronies. The result of this erratic decision was catastrophic. These generals, who now held the keys to the nation's industry, possessed zero knowledge of trade or production. In less than a year, Uganda's economy was paralyzed. Factories shuttered, inflation skyrocketed to 1,000%, and shop shelves were emptied of basic necessities like bread, sugar, and medicine. The nation, once hailed as the Pearl of Africa, was now drowning in absolute, grinding poverty. As the economic fabric of the nation unraveled, a suffocating shroud of absolute paranoia descended upon Idi Amin's mind. He began to perceive a potential assassin in the face of every minister, every general, and every common citizen. To combat these haunting delusions, he established a terrifying intelligence apparatus, the State Research Bureau, or the SRB. Its mandate was singular and absolute: to uproot dissent before it could even be whispered. The killing machine was ignited. Amin turned first on his own military. Soldiers and officers from rival tribes were summoned to barracks in batches and systematically mowed down by gunfire. But the true horror began when the blade of his executions reached the highest echelons of the state. Cabinet ministers, Supreme Court judges, and even archbishops of the church vanished, one after another. When the nation's Chief Justice, Benedicto Kiwanuka, dared to protest the extrajudicial killings, Amin's agents dragged him from the middle of his own courtroom. He was never seen again. The method of disposing of these bodies was so grotesque it remains almost unparalleled in modern history. As the death toll spiraled into the hundreds of thousands, mass graves could no longer contain the carnage. Amin ordered the remains of his rivals to be dumped into the River Nile. The sheer volume of corpses was so immense that at certain intervals, the turbines of the Owen Falls hydroelectric dam ground to a halt, choked by the influx of human limbs and bone. In a literal sense, he was feeding his opposition, dead or alive, to the crocodiles of the Nile. Yet, amidst these atrocities, a darker, more macabre rumor solidified Idi Amin's reputation as the 20th century's most terrifying predator: the allegation of cannibalism. Did he truly consume human flesh? Historical documents and the testimony of those closest to him suggest that Amin was deeply influenced by the superstitions and black magic of certain tribal beliefs. In these occult traditions, consuming the blood or flesh of a powerful enemy is believed to transfer their strength and courage to the victor. His former health minister and several palace servants who later escaped testified to a chilling reality. Idi Amin kept the severed heads of his most significant political enemies in his personal refrigerator within the presidential palace. According to these witnesses, during his bouts of insanity, he would bring these heads to the dinner table. He would speak to them, humiliate them, and laugh in their lifeless faces. When a courageous Western journalist finally asked him in an interview, "Is it true that you are a cannibal?" Amin replied with his signature shameless grin, "No, I do not eat human flesh because I find it too salty." This cynical retort did nothing to dispel the rumors. Instead, it cast a psychological shadow of dread over the entire population. Idi Amin had become the god of death within his borders. But to fully satiate his ego, he required an international stage, a place where he could cast himself as the grand hero of anti-imperialism. The summer of 1976. While Uganda was drowning in a sea of blood and deprivation, an international crisis placed Idi Amin's name once again at the forefront of the global headlines. 4 hijackers seized an Air France passenger jet en route from Tel Aviv to Paris. The captors, 2 members of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine and 2 from the German leftist revolutionary cells, diverted the aircraft to Entebbe airport in Uganda. Idi Amin, who had been a close ally of Israel in the early years of his reign, had become their sworn enemy after the cessation of military aid from Tel Aviv. He welcomed the hijacked plane with open arms. He personally strode onto the tarmac, shaking hands with the hijackers and performing for the television cameras as a powerful mediator and a champion of the Arab world. More than 100 Israeli passengers were held hostage within the airport terminal. But in the dead of night, on July 4, 1976, while Idi Amin slept in his palace, one of the most astonishing and audacious rescue operations in military history was unfolding. 4 C-130 Hercules transport planes of the Israeli Air Force, flying at dangerously low altitudes to evade radar, traversed over 4,000 kilometers to touch down in total darkness on the Entebbe runway. Elite Israeli commandos emerged from the planes in a black Mercedes-Benz, an exact replica of Amin's personal state car, to deceive the Ugandan guards. In a lightning strike lasting less than 90 minutes, the commandos neutralized all the hijackers and 45 Ugandan soldiers, rescued nearly all the hostages, and, before departing, set fire to and destroyed the entire Ugandan Air Force, the Russian-made MiG fighters, parked on the tarmac. The following morning, Idi Amin woke to a devastating reality. Not only had the hostages vanished, but his Air Force had been annihilated. The Entebbe raid was an absolute international humiliation. Before the eyes of the world, he appeared weak, foolish, and defeated. This psychological blow pushed Amin's fractured mind over the edge. In a fit of vengeful rage, he orchestrated the massacre of hundreds of Kenyans living in Uganda, whom he believed had collaborated with Israel. But his blind fury did not stop there. In October 1978, in a desperate gamble to distract the public from internal collapse and military mutinies, Amin made the final mistake of his life. He invaded Tanzania, annexing a portion of its territory. He had fatally underestimated President Julius Nyerere. Nyerere, weary of Amin's insanity, mobilized his army alongside Ugandan exiles and rebels. Contrary to Amin's delusions, his paper tiger army, specialists only in the torture of civilians, collapsed instantly when faced with a professional military force. Even the reinforcements sent by the Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi could not halt the inevitable. In April 1979, as Tanzanian forces closed in on the capital Kampala, the man who called himself the Unconquerable and the Conqueror of the British Empire fled like a coward in the darkness of night via helicopter. He first found refuge in Libya before eventually being granted asylum in Saudi Arabia. Many expected this monster to face international tribunals or the wrath of the Ugandan people. But history does not always dispense justice as we expect. Idi Amin, the man responsible for the slaughter of 500,000 people, spent the remainder of his life in absolute luxury, residing in a palatial villa in Jeddah. He passed his days swimming, watching television, and indulging in expensive cuisine. Never, for even a single second, did he express remorse for the blood he had spilled. Finally, on August 16, 2003, the butcher of Kampala died in a hospital at the age of 78 due to kidney failure, never having answered for a single drop of blood. He left behind a shattered nation, a hollowed economy, and a scarred generation. He remains the symbol of the most dangerous form of power, a power that begins with laughter, jests, and ridiculous spectacles, but ends in carnage and ruin. The life of Idi Amin serves as a testament that we cannot trust the smiling, funny facade of the power-hungry. Sometimes, the clowns are history's most horrific killers. What are your thoughts on this? Do you believe individuals like Idi Amin still walk among us in the world today? Every story has two sides, and the truth usually lies somewhere in the shadows. We want to hear your perspective. Join the discussion in the comments below. If this profile gave you a new perspective, support our mission with a like and share. Thank you for being part of the Profile community. Until next time, stay curious.